to my friends at Dyersburg Primary School. My name is Vanessa Kane. I'm the Children's Director here at MacGyver's Grant Public Library, and today I'm going to read to you a book that goes along with your theme, Growing Up Healthy, Eating Well. Now, a lot of times we talk about foods that we eat and how they make our bodies strong and how we have to eat a whole bunch of different kinds of foods, don't we? We have to eat fruits and vegetables, we have to eat meat and bread and milk and dairy and all kinds of different food groups that make your body run the way it's supposed to. This book is called Thank You, Amu, and all through this book, Amu is cooking something really delicious. And we're going to talk a little bit about the ingredients that might be in that delicious dinner in just a minute. Ingredients is a pretty cool word, isn't it? I like that word. Ingredients means all the things that are in something to make it up. And we use it a lot when we talk about cooking. When you're cooking, you have to gather all your ingredients so that you can make whatever it is that you're making. And so that is what we're going to talk about with Amu and what she's making. Now, this book is written by Oge Mora, and that is the author who wrote the words and the illustrator. So Oge Mora did both things, wrote the story and drew these wonderful pictures. And actually, she cut these pictures out of paper, which is one of Miss Vanessa's very favorite ways to illustrate a children's book. And not only did she just use paper, she used some paper that came out of books that has writing on it. Can you see right there where there's some writing on that building? Some papers that came out of maps, some papers that came out of patterns like you sew clothes with, some that were like, I think, recipes as well, because we were talking about recipes. This book was published by Little Brown and Company, and at the beginning it says, a note to the reader. Amu is pronounced Ah-mu, and it's the Igbo term for queen. So if you saw this picture, you might try to this word, you might try to sound it out and say Omu. That's what we might think it says, but the author tells us how to say it, and it's Amu, and it means queen. So this person that we're going to read about, her name means queen. Isn't that cool? On the corner of First Street and Long Street, on the very top floor, Amu was cooking a thick red stew in a big fat pot for a nice evening meal. She seasoned it and stirred it and took a small taste. What a delicious stew, Amu said. Tonight's dinner will surely be the best I have ever had. And there you can see Amu, and she's tasting her stew, and there's her thick red stew in the big fat pot. And there are some of the ingredients that go in her stew. I see a can, and it's open. I see a recipe. I see, what are these? Well, they look like tomatoes, don't they? And her soup is red, so that makes sense that there might be some tomatoes in there. I want you to look right here in this illustration, and there, it looks like the smell of Amu's stew is coming out of her pot and going across the room, and we're going to talk about that in the next page. That has a good word on it too. With that, Amu put down her spoon and went to read a book before supper. As the thick red stew simmered on the stove, the scrumptious scent wafted out the window and out the door and down the hall and toward the street and around the block until knock. See how it says knock really big? Someone was at the door. I want you to look at the pictures before we find out who's at the door. There is Amu's thick red stew in her big fat pot. And there's a scrumptious means delicious, means yummy, good food. Scrumptious smell wafted out of the window. And the word wafted means it floated on the breeze. So something wafts by you. They use it a lot with the word smell. It wafts, and then you can smell it, okay? So it comes out and into the neighborhood, and there's Amu reading her book. And can you see a friend in a window? Can you see somebody else in the window? There's Amu's stew. There's Amu reading her book. And there is somebody else. Let's find out who that might be. When Amu opened the door, she saw, and there's 3 little dots right there to tell you to turn the page to find out what she saw. A little boy. Little boy, Amu exclaimed. What brings you to my home? I was playing with my race car down the hall when I smelled the most delicious smell, the little boy replied. What is it? Thick red stew. Stew, he sighed. That sure sounds yummy. There's Amu answering the door, and from the inside of her apartment, there's that smell wafting out. Can you smell this thick red stew if you think about it? And there's her little friend, the little boy, asking for some stew. What do you think will happen? Let's find out. And he used the word delicious, didn't he? That means yummy too, doesn't it? Amu thought for a moment. She was saving her stew for dinner, but she had made quite a lot. It would not hurt to share. Would you like some? She asked. The little boy nodded. And so Amu spooned out some thick red stew from her big fat pot for her nice evening meal. Thank you, Amu, the little boy said. And he went on his way. And there we can see a picture of Amu sharing her soup with the little boy. And if you look, you can see that her pot holder is a map. That's what we were talking about, where some of those pictures are cut out of different things. Would you share your stew with a friend who stopped at your house? With that, Amu closed the door and went back to her book. As she read, her thick red stew's scrumptious scent wafted out of the window and out of the door and down the hall and toward the street and around the block until... Knock, knock. Someone was at the door. Now look at this street real fast. Can you see? There's a little boy walking with his soup. And there's a smell wafting down the street. I see a policeman. I see a bus, and look at the people on the bus. They're made out of paper that has writing on it too. Can you see writing anywhere else? I see some writing here on the road. I see a pattern right here. Can you see those pictures of people's dresses? That's from a pattern where you can make a dress. There's another building with some writing on it. Another building with some writing on it. Right there next to it. I like that they made the pictures out of things like that. And a police officer was at her door. Mrs. Police Officer, Amu exclaimed, what brings you to my home? I was on duty down the street when I smelled the most delicious smell, said Miss Police Officer. What is it? Thick red stew. Ah, stew, she said, and her mouth watered. That sounds mighty tasty. And there is Amu opening her door, and there's that scent coming around her and through her and under and around and past the police officer and out into the hall and on its way around the block. Amu thought for a moment. There was still enough to share. Would you like some? The police officer nodded. Once again, Amu spooned out some thick red stew from the big fat pot for her nice evening meal. Thank you, Amu, the officer said, and went on her way. And there's Amu sharing some more of her thick, red, yummy stew. There's that smell wafting around. There she's giving some stew to the policewoman. And so for the second time, Amu closed the door and went back to her book, and sure enough, as she read, her thick red stew's scrumptious scent wafted out the window and out the door and down the hall and toward the street and around the block until knock, knock, knock. Again, somebody was at Amu's door. And then we're going to look and see who that might be. That looks like a construction worker, doesn't it? He's got on one of those hard hats. He's got on some of those boots that protect his feet. And he's holding a sack that has words on it, doesn't he? There's a police officer with her bowl of soup walking by, and there's a scent coming out, and there's a hot dog vendor. Can you see the hot dog vendor with his umbrella and his hot dog stand? This time, when Amu opened the door, she saw a hot dog vendor. Mr. Hot Dog Vendor, Amu exclaimed, what brings you to my home? I was selling my hot dogs down the block when I smelled the most delicious smell, said Mr. Hot Dog Vendor. What is it? Thick red stew. Oh, stew. The vendor licked his lips. That sounds quite delectable. And there's another word for yummy. So we've got delicious, scrumptious, and delectable. So maybe at lunch day you might say, that sounds delectable. What do you think? That's a pretty good word, isn't it? So there is the hot dog vendor talking with Amu, and there's that smell coming out of her door and out and around through the house and out the door and down the hall and into the street. So Amu spooned out some thick red stew from the big fat pot for her nice evening meal. "Thank you, Amu," the hot dog vendor said, and he went on his way. And there's Amu sharing one more time, and there's the hot dog vendor smelling that smell. I hadn't shown that before, that it goes right to his nose so he can smell that smell. Throughout the day, people from all across the neighborhood knocked on Amu's door. She fed a shop owner, a cab driver, a doctor, an actor, a lawyer, a dancer, a baker, an artist, a singer, an athlete, a bus driver, a construction worker, and even the mayor stopped by. And each time they knocked, Amu shared. And look at all those people in that picture. All those people she shared with. Soon the sky darkened, the streetlights brightened, and it was finally time for dinner. But when Amu opened her big fat pot of thick red stew for her nice evening meal, it was empty. No more thick red stew. She smelled it all day, and she didn't even get to have a bite herself. That makes me hungry just thinking about it. Amu sniffled. "There goes the best dinner I ever had," she said. Sorry and blue, she sat down at the table with her empty pot until... Knock, 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 knock. Who could that be, Amu wondered, and when she opened the door, she saw... We're going to open it in a minute, but I want you to look at poor Amu's sad face. She was so hungry, and she had the best stew. And now she doesn't. She's hungry. The little boy, the police officer, the hot dog vendor, the shop owner, the cab driver, the doctor, the actor, the lawyer, the dancer, the baker. Why, everyone she fed today was at her door. I'm sorry, everyone, Amu sighed. My thick red stew is all gone. I have nothing left to share. The little boy tugged at Amu's sleeve. Don't worry, Amu. We're not here to ask. We are here to give. There's all the friends that she shared her stew with at her door, and there's a little boy. What do you think they're going to give her? The police officer carried in a fresh salad. Oh, is that good for you to eat? Oh, it is. The mayor entered with a roast chicken. Is that good for you to eat? Yes, it is. The baker brought a collection of sweet goodies. Is that good for you to eat? A little at a time. Even the little boy presented Amu with something special in a shiny red envelope. Everyone who had knocked on Amu's door that day squeezed inside her tiny apartment, and together they ate and danced and celebrated. While Amu's big fat pot of thick red stew was empty, her heart was full of happiness and love. And look at all of those things on the table for them to eat, all those good, yummy foods that'll make them strong. And there's the envelope that Amu got from the little boy. And look, they all have their own smells wafting out of the pots and tickling people's noses because they taste so good. Smell so good. And that was the best dinner she ever had. And there is what was in that little red envelope. It says, "Thank you, Amu." So they gave her a little note. Did you like that book? Do you think that it was a healthy meal that Amu made in her pot with all those vegetables? Thick red stew is good for you, isn't it? It'll make you have big muscles, and she fed her whole neighborhood. I think that's a wonderful book about both healthy eating and sharing, and I hope that you have a wonderful day and you're really good for your teachers, and I'll see you next week.